I would like to invite our next guest speaker to the stage, Tobias de Haan. Please come up, Tobias. So Tobias works for the European Legal Support Center. It's an organization defending and empowering the Palestinian solidarity movement by legal means. And Tobias, we're going to talk a bit about, you've made you did quite some research on the ways that Palestinian solidarity is being suppressed at this moment, but also for quite some time in Europe. Tobias, what sort of suppression does Palestinian solidarity encounter? Could you tell us a little bit about that? And you made some sheets. Should we put the first sheet on already? Or Edwin, can you help with that? Great.
Perfect. Thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing this. It's super important, and it's really good to see so many people here as well. So thank you all for coming. And so I just very quickly also wanted to introduce the ELSC as an organization, because I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with our work. The European Legal Support Center, or the ELSC for short, is kind of the first and only independent organization in Europe defending and empowering Palestine solidarity across different countries. So we work in different contexts, but we do have a specific focus on the Netherlands, the UK, and obviously also Germany, because I think a lot of people know that Germany is particularly bad. The UK is also very bad. And speaking up for Palestine in those countries can be very tough. And so my work is to monitor the repression of Palestine solidarity in these different countries. So what I do is that I look at how people speaking up for Palestine, organizations, activists and academics, how they face, a lot of different problems. And as you were asking, it can be people losing their jobs for publishing certain tweets. It could be people running into difficulties in their universities, students who maybe speak at protests, or academics who stand in solidarity, then get called into their supervisors to say, to kind of explain why they said certain things or why they published certain tweets, but also very real physical violence to protesters. I think we've all seen, or many of us will have seen, the videos from Amsterdam, from here, but also from the UK, from Germany, from Spain, from Italy also, where the police, is really very violent with people who really want a genocide to end. And of course, there's also artists or people who've been invited to have an exhibition or a panel or have, a certain engagement that is then cancelled for very vague reasons. What you see, especially in Germany, is people getting cancelled for having signed letters in support of BDS. So that is, of course, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement that is calling for kind of a political isolation of Israel, very similar to what happened, obviously, with South Africa in the 80s and the 90s. So really, the repression is very broad, and it can happen to very many people. But it obviously affects different people in different ways. But what you see reproduced in the repression is colonial narratives. And obviously, it also interacts with racist sentiments that already exist in society, right? So you can also observe people facing literal deportation orders or their residency being somehow threatened because they were in a certain organization or they stood in solidarity. And it's a big problem, but we're fighting against it and we're giving people free legal support to do it.
That's great. That's a great initiative. So that deserves an applause. So I was wondering if you see a difference in the way and also in the intensity with which the voices, the actions are being suppressed throughout Europe.
Yeah, I think from this first slide, it's pretty clear that there is a difference. From now, speaking now in May of 2024, kind of 8 months after the genocide began, there's definitely a difference, but also what's important to talk about is that the patterns and the things that we're seeing are not new. Rather, that what is new is, I think, an escalation in frequency and intensity of these incidents, and kind of, I think governments and lobby groups and societal actors who enact the repression, so to say, is broadening their scope, right? Like broadening their scope and, really going very hard. So if we look at the graphs, there are 1,359 incidents that we've recorded since we started our monitoring project, which we started in 2019. And of these incidents, more than 1,000 have been recorded since October, and around 336 have been recorded before that time. And obviously, a big disclaimer to make here is also that we are just humans and we're not able to monitor everything. And what's very likely is that there's obviously more out there. There's people who are afraid to speak up but have maybe suffered repression. And that's very normal because there's a climate of fear, obviously, speaking around Palestine in certain contexts. But yeah, what we're seeing is not necessarily new, but also just really more intense and more frequent.
Can I ask you something? Did you have the impression that also before the 7th of October, there was a trend that the suppression was going up, that the activities were that they were getting more active wherever it comes from?
Yeah, that's a bit hard to say, but I would say that for sure over the past few years, I think 2019 is also kind of how the ELSC was created, was because, the last few years, I would say since 2016-17, we've seen with the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which defines criticism of Israel, or at least a lot of forms of it, it conflates that with anti-Semitism, and that was then weaponized in a lot of countries to kind of stifle speech and activism on Palestine. And that was then adopted by a lot of countries. It was also going to be adopted by the UN before a lot of human rights organizations said, please, no, that's a bad idea. And then also the passing of anti-BDS motions in countries such as Germany and also the US, where speaking out in support of BDS or signing BDS letters or being a BDS activist was criminalized. And these were just policies, politicians telling themselves, we think this is bad, but it's not law, but it's used as law, right? And that's what's scary. So I think over the past few years, for sure, to answer your question, we've seen an escalation.
And how do you register the incidents? Do people self-report, or do you follow the media and do or is it a combination of both? Just to see your methodology.
Yeah, so we do both, and I can kind of make it visible with the next slide. This is kind of what we've seen over the last few years in Europe. So you can definitely see that the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany are focus countries, and also where we see a lot, of the repression taking place. And many people report the incidents to us through our website, our kind of, social media channels, or our hotline in Germany. We have a hotline phone number. And also at the same time, we obviously look at news articles, we look at social media and try to really, see what's going on in the world and what kind of laws are being enacted. This, for example, is Germany. And here you see a breakdown of all the different incident types, because we record, obviously, incident per type. There's smear campaigns, which are a huge thing in Germany, where, for example, a lobby group starts a smear campaign by going to the right-wing press, like tabloid press, And then that gets picked up by the press, and that creates a storm, and then also politicians mingle in and say their things about it. And that, paired with what we call threat of legal action, is a huge topic in Germany, where say police arrests you for something, for having said, for example, from the river to the sea, or stop the genocide, or things of the sort. And then you get a letter from the police, and then you have to, come to the station, or you get charged with incitement to hatred, and then you have to go to court. And I just want to pause here and then say that I'm very aware that these things are quite, real and quite heavy, and people who face these legal troubles, it's not easy for them, especially for people who are financially maybe more vulnerable or racialized by, these European states. But we've also seen since October so many people standing in solidarity with us, and also just legal victories, because we believe that so much of the repression is not rooted in law. It's very often rooted in fiction, lobbying, and colonial silencing of people who want human rights abusers to stop. And for example, with Ghassan Abu-Sittah, we were able to overturn his ban in Germany, and we were also able to, in certain, parts of Germany, to get the "From the River to the Sea" slogan decriminalized, but also in the UK, we're supporting students who face deportation charges, academics and doctors who are facing, disciplinary investigations and actions. So I also want to emphasize that, we're also winning and fighting back. And the people who support us, we're really... Yeah, we're honestly super grateful for everyone that's supporting our work, because we're also, we're a collective of lawyers and non-lawyers doing this, and we don't believe that law is the fix for everything, obviously. It's not the only tool that we need to use, but sometimes it can be useful, and when it is, we do want to fight back with law, so yeah.
I think it's a very noble and also completely legal way of fighting, right? So how do you exactly support people? Of course, it depends on the matter, of course. But could you maybe give an example of, well, of course, Abu-Sitta we already saw. But could you give us another example of something completely different that you did?
Yeah. So what happens is the different individual people just report to us and say, this has happened to me. I would like to request legal support. We then have both an in-house team of lawyers specialized in different areas of law, but also legal networks in all the countries that we work in. So lawyers that don't directly maybe work for us, but we work with them, they have expertise in, say, migration law, media law, and then we try and see what we can do in their case and try to support them as best as we can. And for example, when people receive letters because they posted something online that is then being valued as, this or that, or the student encampments, for example, that are taking place right now, we're trying to also support them with getting legal kind of registrations, as a registered protest. This, we also protect the right to protest because it is a right. And even though the mayor of Amsterdam, and even though, in Germany, in the UK, university presidents, mayors, and politicians try to suppress and silence these people, they have a right to protest, and they are on the right side of history. So that's kind of also the stuff we do.
Great. And how can we support you or the ELSC in the Netherlands? Can you tell us a bit about that?
One thing is obviously to kind of amplify our work, to kind of look us out on the internet, find us, and find us.
Should we follow you on Insta or on?
I think I put it on the last slide as well. Our website is elsc.support. And there we, kind of post the news about our work, but also on Instagram, on Twitter, we tell people about what we're currently doing. We also publish the things that we monitor, the things that we see and maybe aren't always legally involved in. And we are always super, super grateful for any donations that, people can make, even if it's €1 a month, even if it's, one-time donations. because that's what this work needs. It needs solidarity from normal people coming together, because also, you know, we want to kind of demystify law as being exclusionary, elitist, which in many cases, sadly, if we're honest, sometimes it is. But we're trying to, you know, use this as a tool for the movement, and if the movement, can use our help, we're more than happy to support. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Tobias. Thank you for your important work, and I think that we are very grateful for initiatives such as these. I think that, well, in the Netherlands, we are, I think, once again with this week the coalition agreement was presented, and I thought, God, I hope we manage to keep the legal sector, the judicial power a bit in place, because I don't know what's going to happen when it comes from our legislative and executive power. So thank you very much for your noble fight and your legal fight, and we will make sure to follow him, to follow ELSC, and yeah, thank you, Tobias, for doing this important work and protecting freedoms.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next guest is Wieland Hoban. I would like to invite you on stage after telling who Wieland is. Where's my card? There you are. So Wieland is the chair of, or the president of Jüdische Stimme, the Jewish Voice for Peace in the Middle East. A German organization consisting of Jews that are anti-Zionist, or at least critical of Israel. Wieland identifies as an anti-Zionist Jew. He was the co-organizer of the Palästina Kongress in Berlin, where Dr. Ghassan Abu-Sittah was supposed to speak. And yeah, please come on stage, because we would love to hear your experiences, Wieland. Welcome. I would also like to invite on stage Nabil. Nabil prefers to, well, remain a little bit anonymous. He will be here, of course, with his face and his first name, but he has encountered quite some difficulties already. Nabil is half Palestinian. He is a student activist who has been, well, basically, I think, since September, right? A bit before October 7th, he got very involved in the movement. He was also doing support work for the Congress, but he wants to keep a low profile. So we're very, very, very grateful that you are here to share your experiences of how suppression works. Can I invite you on stage, Nabil? And then our third guest on stage is Marloes van Noorloos. Marloes is an associate professor of criminal law at Leiden University. She made publications on hate crimes, movement restrictions for people suspected of planning to join terrorist groups, and criminal proceedings against participants of peaceful protests. And she will be sharing some knowledge about how this all works legally and what are the prognoses for the years to come, maybe. Marloes, could you please come on stage? Thank you. Nabil, I would like to start with you. This must be particularly, I don't know, I think it's already on, probably.
Hello? Hi.
Yeah, we hear you, I think. Yes. Nabil, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with, you know, getting involved in the movement, and also, well, what was your first experience with your voice being basically suppressed?
I've been in Berlin for about 2 years, and I think as a Palestinian in Berlin, it's not even the question of your voice necessarily being repressed, but your voice is always repressed. Like, there's no spaces. Demonstrations being shut down and violently oppressed is a common occurrence. So I've been arrested, I've been detained a lot, I've been in events that were shut down, like the Palestine Conference, but even getting a space to speak out for Palestine is a rarity in Berlin. And I've been active since, for 2 years now, but specifically since October for the specifically for the Palestine movement, and I was very involved in helping with the Palestine Conference. This Palestine Conference came out of sort of looking at, okay, we've been out on the streets for 3-4 months, but the government obviously didn't really seem to notice or care, or it didn't mark a shift in their rhetoric. And this conference came out of the want to get experts together to speak on what's happening and to have a unified voice in accusing the government of what they're doing. As in, the German government supplies 30% of weapons to the Israeli army. They are ideologically probably only behind America in their support of Israel. In the ICJ case, they were the first government to jump behind Israel against South Africa. They really don't shy away from full solidarity with a genocidal regime at the moment. And the Congress, everyone kind of saw what happened, I assume. We were violently stormed by the police. But the Congress itself also marked a shift, I think, in the repression we've been facing and the repression Palestinian Voice has been facing, because the whole idea of the Congress was to get Palestinians together to speak, and it was a completely illegal thing. I mean, this event today is like legal as well, as a conference would be. But the government obviously didn't care that we were all like within our rights, and still stormed it in complete there's no legal basis for it, what they did. And it marked a shift, as in not only do they repress when we say something, but they repress now suddenly before we said something. And
what was their justification in the end for the way they acted, or was there no accountability anyway?
The official justification for why they banned it, what the police tweeted out afterwards, was that there was a risk of someone joining the conference who has said something anti-Semitic, and in the past there was a risk of something being said. Like, it wasn't that something had been said. This is the justification for banning a 3-day conference, and they banned it within 2 minutes of a speaker that they said had said something in the past. Like, it's so Orwellian, these justifications. And the next day, or I think 2 days after, our Minister of Interior, Nancy Faeser, went out and said that it was an Islamist conference, even though Wieland was a co-organizer and was the face of the conference a lot of times. And it just, like, there was no sense in any of it in the end, but it didn't really matter for the government. And since then, they've also with Ghassan Abu-Sittah's ban, there was no justification for it, and obviously as soon as you have it in front of court, it's revoked.
Is that something that you see a lot in the German rhetoric to suppress the intersection with the anti-Islamist movements in the country?
Yeah. Germany has, since October, really went back to their Staatsräson, this reason of being of the German state. Since the Second World War, it said that because of Germany's, because they did the Holocaust, now they have, like, the reason of state was suddenly after Second World War being to support the Jewish people and support the Israeli creation. And like it was said before, the IHRA definition, which was adopted in Germany by the government, equates any anti-Zionist critique as anti-Semitic, and anti-Semitic critique is then pursuable by law, by the government. So really, I mean, yesterday we had a group in Duisburg, which like an activist group, that was banned. Like, the whole organization was banned from any political work again, and most likely the members themselves will legally prosecuted. And the justification, they said that it was anti-Semitic and that it was Israel haters. But that's the whole justification. There's 2 sentences for a whole organization of people that have been active since September or October to be banned. There's nothing further than these things of, oh, they're anti-Semitic, so that's it.
And I assume that it's a bit like, isn't there any pushback from Parliament? I assume that there are people that are worried about this, because it sounds quite disturbing that you can just ban organizations without having a justification, a legal justification, or is it like very, very quiet?
I think, for example, I think it was November or December, this group in Germany, Samidun, which was a network of Palestinians mainly who fought for Palestinian prisoners in Palestine. And they were banned, but the whole whole political establishment jumped behind this banning of this group, because they said, well, they're Hamas supporters, so they deserve what basically happened to them. So, you know, Germany is very much behind the thinking of, we can tolerate things until they support terrorism. And I assume it's going to be the same with this group again, as in, you know, human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly apply, like Ghassan Abu-Sittah said, to white people, basically, you know, to the general society, but not to the brown bodies, because they're not seen as full people under that law. What I would say is, for the conference that was banned, that marked a shift again in the rhetoric of political establishment. We had politicians that were against what we, political messaging, but then said what the government did in the conference, that was markedly too far. We had people that before the conference said, you know, we're Israel haters, we're this, we're that. We had even Zionists who afterwards said, okay, we hate those people, but what you did to them, that was too far, because it infringes on everyone's fundamental rights all of a sudden. And it creates precedents. Right,
absolutely, yeah. I would like to go to Wieland, because you, well, when we were preparing this this session, we talked about you as being Jewish and the strange dynamics that occur in the weaponization, basically, of the fight against anti-Semitism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this weaponization has been taking place not only in Germany, of course, in the UK and the US. It's been a major force, especially in connection with the IHRA definition. And I think the meaning of the very term has become eroded in such a way that it hardly serves any purpose anymore, except a bad faith purpose. And it's reached the point where I think probably statistically, if you were to look at a handful of anti-Semitism accusations that have come up and see, okay, how many of these are based on statements about Israel? And it's clear that it will be the vast majority. And there's a complete double standard also in how speech relating to, let's say, the broad complex of Israel, Jews, how these are treated depending on the political context. So any harsh criticism of Israel will be deemed anti-Semitic, or, well, first of all, will be taken as a statement about Jews, because you say, okay, Israel stands for Jews, it's the Jewish state. It is, some people have even used the collective Jew as a term. I find that a very unpleasant term. But in any case, they will first of all say, okay, when people say Israel, what they really mean is Jews. You know, so there's always this element of kind of insinuation and suspicion, saying that everything is a dog whistle, basically. And then, whereas when you have far-right affiliations among say, conservative politicians, that, you know, which normally have anti-Semitic elements as well, as you would expect on the far right, then one doesn't see anywhere near the same level of outrage or also scrutiny from the authorities and the media. So really then what this shows is that it's not actually about, it's not really about Jews, or certainly not about all Jews. It's really more about Israel. And if one understands a bit also about the political and historical context of what Israel means in Germany, then actually you come to realize that it's also about Germany itself, so that attacks on Israel are seen by the system, and in a sense they are actually also attacks on Germany.
That's interesting. Can you just take us one step further in that reasoning? Because I think that there are also, like, this happens in the Netherlands as well. We are quite similar, I think, to what happens in Germany. But what do you mean exactly by attacks on Israel? It's an attack on us Germans?
Well, there are some more general and more specific aspects to this. So at the general level, we have this whole narrative, okay, we all know the slogan, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And what that really means is that it's the last remaining Western colony in the Middle East. And so in that sense, an ideologically motivated attack on Israel is an attack on Western imperialism, first of all. And then, in the case of Germany, it's also an attack on a kind of hypocritical culture of you know, moral atonement and supposed historical responsibility in the wake of the Holocaust. And I mean, what I really want to emphasize is that this is the cover story, you know, and this is what a lot of ordinary people believe. But it's not what actually motivates, you know, the ruling class and the government. And a Jewish comrade in Berlin recently put it very succinctly. He said, "It's not about Auschwitz; it's about NATO." Yeah, I don't mean to take credit for his words. But yeah, I thought he put it very well. Yeah, but so that's the general Western aspect. But in Germany, the idea actually since the 1950s has been, how do we rehabilitate Germany after this real moral shame after the Holocaust? Because, you know, it wasn't just a matter of losing a war. It was really a matter of losing standing. And you're thinking, you know, this idea of Germany is, you know, the country of, I don't know, you know, Bach, Mozart, Goethe, whatever. You know, there's this phrase in German, the country of poets and thinkers, right? All these noble values, etc. And then they carry out this Holocaust. So there was this incredible shame. And the first chancellor after the war, Konrad Adenauer, he worked out that an important kind of fast-track route to being a player on the international stage again would be to establish good ties with Israel. And, you know, he didn't do that out of particular, you know, I wouldn't say love for Jews. He in fact said that one should not underestimate the influence of the Jews, which is the sort of statement one might expect to hear from people who don't like Jews very much. But he saw that then establishing ties with Israel and already from the 1950s selling arms to Israel and paying reparations, that this was a way for Germany to look better after the years of shame. And that's been really internalized by the political establishment, sometimes more under the surface, sometimes more visibly. And I think really since the 80s, I mean, it had become a bit more of just a standard way of functioning, but then from the 80s, people started really being demonstrative about it again, and, you know, saying that this is our great moral responsibility, you know, and all this sort of rhetoric. And yeah, unfortunately, there are ordinary people who believe that, who don't see just the cynicism and the national or imperialist interest behind it. You know, Germany is still the second biggest arms supplier to Israel. You know, they make a lot of money out of their supposed guilt. But yeah, there are a lot of people, though, if you speak to them, you know, you can still, I guess depending on their age, you know, people in their 20s, of course it's further away for them. But you can still sort of activate this sense of responsibility, and among those who just aren't so informed, or maybe just who censor their own thoughts a bit more, there's still this feeling that they can't really attack Israel in any substantive way, that, you know, or at least not as Germans, that maybe they understand if other people do, but they don't feel that they have the right as Germans to say certain things or even to think certain things. You know, there's a great culture of obedience in Germany.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you. This is very, very interesting, and it must be such a difficult place for you to navigate with your identity that is at the same time you are Jewish, but you are also like anti-Zionist. Do you well, it's a bit of a stupid question maybe in these times, but do you feel safe? How is it with your feelings of safety?
Well, I think safety is always relative, and you know, generally the people who get arrested most at these demonstrations are not usually the ones with the lightest skin. So, you know, part of our job also, I mean, as an organization, as activists, is to point this out, and to point out also that the struggle for Palestinian rights is part of the international anti-racist struggle, that this is not just a particularist issue, because that's one of the big problems also in the German understanding of anti-Semitism, that often it doesn't lead to any kind of introspection about, you know, racial, ethnic discrimination. It's just taken as this particular issue because that's the one that has been treated as most important in German history. You know, whereas most people, they couldn't care less about the Namibian genocide, for example, because those were black Africans, and it wasn't happening in Europe. And I mean, and I'm pretty sure that if the Holocaust had only been carried out against Eastern European Jews who are more religious, more traditional, you know, wearing with the traditional appearance, I think also that the West would have cared less about that as well than about, you know, these more obviously white, middle-class Western Jews.
They were more exotic Jews, like
more racialized, you might say.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. This is really interesting. I would like to go to Marloes because you can maybe, like, what I hear a lot from actually what happened the whole afternoon is there's a lot of legal muddy waters, right? And there's like very firm action, but basically with a very vague legal basis. What are your reflections on that, as like with the legal point of view?
Yes, thank you. So to start with, I think indeed when you look at the right to freedom of expression, also as the European Court of Human Rights, a very important body in that respect, as it interprets this right, in a very famous case from a few years ago, Baldassi, they have made it very clear that there is a right to boycott. This was a case about activists, BDS activists, boycotting Israeli products in supermarkets, and they were prosecuted for incitement to discrimination. The European Court did not accept this and found a violation of the right to freedom of expression because it's very important to be able to protest, especially, gross human rights violations, and people have to be able to stand up against that and not being criminalized. And this has been quite a revolutionary development, because earlier case law by the same court was less progressive, so to say. So now we have quite a clear legal development here. However, what you see in reality, indeed, and as we've seen with Ghassan's ban as well, it's so easy to ban people and to fight these bans. It takes time, and it takes legal action. And once the legal action is fortunately successful, then much harm has already been done. Smear campaigns, etc. It goes on so many different fronts. Bank accounts that do not work anymore, etc. And I think, as a background to all of these developments, on the one hand, indeed, the weaponization of anti-Semitism, as you rightfully pointed out, with the IHRA definition. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of what the definition is, but it's basically a definition by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance of anti-Semitism. It was meant to strengthen the fight against anti-Semitism by providing quite a vague definition with some examples, and also pointing out that harsh criticism of Israel, if other countries are not criticized in the same way, then that might point to anti-Semitism. But the whole definition was never meant by its makers to be used for legal purposes, because it is too vague for that. But it's been promoted around the world by Israel and its allies, and used in ways that stifle free speech. So that's one element, and I think actually this weaponization of anti-Semitism in this way doesn't help the actual fight against anti-Semitism, which is very important. So there's been some developments. It's interesting, the Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism is an alternative kind of definition made by scholars and organizations, which does a much better job in many respects, although you can still think about other definitions. But I am afraid that this whole vague definition and all of the developments from Israel that come with it have already led to so much damage. But I hope there is room for thinking in a different way about fighting anti-Semitism now. Another related development, I think, in the legal sphere has been the fight against terrorism since 9/11, especially, has led to very harsh laws in all kinds of fields over the whole world, also in Europe and in many European countries, in EU law as well. Where not just terrorist acts are criminalized, which is of course logical, but also a very broad range of expressions, including expressions such as glorification of terrorism. And these kinds of laws are now, they have always been used very much, I think, against what is called Islamic terrorism, to target Muslim speech. And at this moment, I think these kinds of laws are also very much behind many of these legal campaigns. And like the Schengen information system, for instance, with the ban that Ghassan was a victim of. these kinds of systems also use these very broad definitions of terrorism, including all these kinds of expressions, so that almost everything falls under terrorism at a certain point, and you can use it in very broad ways. Well, fortunately, the ban was lifted now, but I'm not optimistic about, well, how these systems can work in the future.
Does it? Thank you. Does it help? Because I can imagine that, for example, this how do you call it? Not a verdict, but a ruling by the judge in Potsdam, for example, on Ghassan Abu-Sittah, and also the jurisprudence that's come from the ELSC actions. Does it help? Does it form like a shield to protect the basic rights to counter this movement?
Yes, absolutely. It's very important, and I admire the work that you do. I think it creates precedents, and it creates possibilities to continue to stress the right to freedom of expression, the right to protest, and to show also as examples to other countries that within these legal systems, these rights have to be upheld.
Great. And just a question to have a bit of a reflection on the Dutch situation. Of course, this new government coalition agreement has been presented with a number of, I think, disturbing announcements. What is your prognosis? How is this going to develop in your legal view?
Yes, some of the plans included targeting terrorism and glorification of terrorism even harsher. So I'm not optimistic about what that would mean. They want to change, I think, the criminal code as well to be able to act more easily against these kinds of expressions. So what that would mean in practice, let's hope that it will all end very soon in some way. I'm not sure how, but
we didn't even start yet. So thank you so much. We are in 10 minutes. It's 5. It flew by. I would really like to give the opportunity to the audience to ask a number of questions.
Could I maybe just add something
yes,
about the Congress?
Of course.
Because, the Congress became famous, you might say, for not being able to happen.
Right.
Even though I did think it was actually a victory already that it began at all, because people were really trying to ban it from weeks beforehand. But after this experience, and after many experiences of activists having their spaces taken away, and of any event always having the danger of a space cancellation, the organizational team of the Congress has decided also to purchase a space that can be used permanently for Palestine-related events.
It's a great idea.
And that there will also soon be a fundraising campaign that'll be launched in order to make this possible. So watch this space.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. We will watch it. Nabil?
May I add to that as well that the importance of the space is also that Berlin is home to one of the biggest or the biggest Palestinian diaspora in Europe, and that the German government is set up in this way that a lot relies on state funding. So we've seen these last 6 months a lot of vital spaces. I mean, they shut down Oyun, which is a cultural space in Germany, in the Palestinian, in a space with a lot of Palestinians. They just last week, even in conjunction with the Congress, shut down 2 centers for women at risk. That was now overturned for this year because of public pressure, but this space is also vitally important because the German state has made it impossible to not to do any sort of events. For the Congress, we had high-ranking politicians calling for private private venues to reject us. I mean, from all levels of government, we had people against us, only for wanting to speak up. So this importance is also not only for the organizers, but for Palestinian culture in the diaspora in Germany.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, I saw a hand going up there. Edwin, can you help with the microphone?
Thank you very much. My question is about the complicity of media, mainstream media. I haven't heard it today in these 2 hours, that how complicit the media is. We're not allowed to make statements, but just to say, I'm Turkish, and I'm really like... we know that the press is not free in Turkey. It's fine, we know that, everybody knows, and you take the measure in the papers when you're reading them. And I started pitying people in the Netherlands and Europe thinking that their press is free, while there's a huge censorship on what's happening, and their complicity in the whole thing, and they're just moving along with the governments. So this needs to be called out, and I'm curious about it. Not only this, but also Sarah, perhaps, and how they're experiencing it in the Netherlands.
Yeah. So the media. Well, perhaps. Yeah, you are, of course, in the German media landscape. You're probably not following. So perhaps, Sarah, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. What we've seen is that whenever we do an activity, it's always kind of a struggle to get the attention of the media. There's a very quick and attempt to kind of frame it in a certain way. I do have to say, if I'm being quite honest, there seems to be a slight improvement in the last couple of months, because even people within the media are looking at what's online and what's in their newspaper and their news outlets, and they're seeing the discrepancy. And there's been recently a letter signed with hundreds of journalists and writers saying, this is not possible, we need a ceasefire, we need to be able to talk about this. And I think that one of the things that came to mind also hearing this is this very famous sentence that said, well, when they came for the Jews, I didn't say something because I wasn't Jewish, and when they came for the Gypsies, I didn't say something because I wasn't Gypsy, and when they came for me, there was no one left to defend me. And what I think that we need to realize here in Europe is that when they came for the doctors, and we don't defend them because their doctors far away, and when they come for the journalists in Gaza, but we don't defend them because they're journalists far away, and when they come for the students, the way they have never come for farmers being active or hooligans being active with the same level of aggression, and we say, well, I'm not a student, and it's not my problem. The question is going to be, who's going to be there for us when it's our turn?
Thank you, Sarah. I see a question there, Edwin.
What I miss in the Western countries, I'm half Spanish, half Moroccan, born in the Netherlands, so I have an advantage reading in different languages. Let's say on the topic of education, which is very important, because in the West it's like people think that history started in 1940, and this is very disturbing. And the second thing is that we have seen Nicaragua and Colombia now that will file the case at the ICJ. It's very important to understand the interconnection of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Colombia with Palestine. And here in the West, the last centuries or the last decades, we heard that Cuba is a dictator. Colombia is dictator. Venezuela is dictator. So it's important to do more research on that, because I've been working in the medical industry.
What is your question, sorry?
And the question is there audience, or is there a possibility to make this more, to bring this more to the surface? Because we know Cuba about, when we talk about Cuba, we think about salsa and Cuba Libre, But there is more. So my question is there something that can be started by your bigger organizations on the interconnections of these countries with Palestine? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know who I would be able to ask the question. I think that there is a lot of intersections in liberation movements and in the fighting of oppression worldwide with the Palestinian movements. Nabil, I see you nodding your head. Perhaps you can elaborate a bit on that?
I think we've been seeing, there's a sentence that goes around of Palestine is all of our liberations, or like no one is free until Palestine is free. And I think what we've seen since October is that Palestine is such a clear example of Western imperialism, is that it's impossible for people that are following what's happening to not see what Europe is doing everywhere else. And it's also awakened people through Palestine to all these other struggles. I mean, we've suddenly been hearing people talk about Congo and Sudan, which they would not have done as much if Palestine wasn't happening. I mean, as a Palestinian, it's always this thing of, it's so, like it hurts so much to see how much like Palestine has to suffer for people to wake up. But it's also in a way a pride of us as Palestinians are making the world wake up, as in because of our steadfastness and because of our 70 years of struggle, people, we're also making people wake up to the global south as a whole.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nabil. It is already 5, but I see some hands. Shall we do 3 questions and then I'll liberate you from this hot, dark place? The lady here in the blue. And if you have to go, of course, I cannot keep you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, to Wieland and Nabil, did you ever think about going online with the Palästina Kongress? Because that they cannot prohibit.
Well,
That's what you think.
I see significant looks here. Wieland, would you like to answer, or Nabil?
Well, they did try and ban Ghassan Abu-Sittah from actually joining online. They threatened him in Berlin at the airport that if he was to join online, there would be a prison sentence, which, since when does Germany have jurisdiction in the UK? But yeah, we are definitely, I mean, like Wieland said, like the Congress was exceptionally successful in making the world see how restrictive Germany is, but it did silence us. I mean, it did, in effect, silence all the panelists we had involved, but in no way are we letting ourselves be silenced. I mean, the Palestine Congress is ongoing, and we will still keep our voices up, and we will announce things in the future, but it's definitely not that we're just going to be silent and sit down because the German state basically forced us to.
And can I maybe just regarding also the question, which, I mean, as would be reasonable, assumed that surely one can't forbid that as well. But I would say that, you know, in the last decade, it's become common to speak of a sort of post-truth world. But I think in Germany, there's also a kind of post-law situation, especially in Berlin. In Berlin, it's at a higher level than in most other places in the country, but there are still some manifestations. It's like when you have to force the state to actually follow its own rules, which of course costs time and money and effort, which not everybody has. And so, you know, whether it's a demonstration ban or an unlawful firing, you know, these are things which the state can do without it being based on a law, just because they can. And to really change it, then you have to go through the laborious process of doing something about it. And maybe in the end, you know, they'll say you're right, but then maybe even that won't actually have any consequences because maybe, you know, this thing is no longer relevant to the present. Like, for example, if the legal challenge to the Congress ban, you know, if it were to be ascertained that yes, it was against the law, etc., you know, it's a bit late in the day.
It's too
right?
late, right? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Edwin, you have the next one ready?
Thank you. I feel that a lot of common people, just like we are, have felt a lot of helplessness in the past months. and feeling like we can't really do something about the situation, the genocide, everything that is playing out in front of our eyes. You have beautifully described the narrative, but I would like to ask for an imperative, and this is a question to all the speakers. What do you think every individual person sitting here can do to help the cause, to support it, and to take something away that we can give to other people? Thank you.
Very good question. Wow, wow. Who feel? Oh, yeah, Sophie, please.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I would say, yeah, one of the things I liked about the reaction that I felt after October as a Palestinian was just sometimes people asking, how are you? I think if you know any Palestinian or anyone who is very involved in what's happening in Palestine, just try to send them love. If you have a bit of money, try to donate to some organizations. And if you have a bit of time, try to advocate. And you don't even need to be the creative voice. You can just echo what others are saying. I think if each person in this room and beyond this room would do that, there will be a lot of waves happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Sarah, keep it short.
And I think that one of the ways that you can also help is speak out. So there's a lot of censor and self-censor going on. And when one person is more outspoken, there's going to be a lot of people trying to cut that person down. And it's very helpful if a lot of people that maybe don't have a very loud voice or on the forefront will say, well, it's not that bad. I mean, why not? Just asking the question really clearly, why not? Why wouldn't we divest from Israeli university that are contributing to militarization of a genocide? Why wouldn't we do that? Because I think there's a very big group that maybe didn't grow up with a lot of knowledge about the history of Palestine, but that is starting to get the feeling that something is off. They cannot quite put their fingers on it, but something is off. And I think that asking questions and supporting the people that speak up can have a very big impact in that.
That's a good addition. I think we have only time for one more. Oh, there's so many. Excuse me. Yeah, you can shout it. I will amplify it. Great. Did everybody hear that? You can send Tweede Kamerleden, members of parliament, you can send them emails. You can bomb them with emails. I'm just doing a suggestion here.
May I add one last?
Oh, sorry. Oh, Nabil.
One last action.
Yeah, this is
go support the students.
Absolutely. Yes.
Go to your. If you want to help Palestinians, right after you leave here, go to the next student encampment. You know, go support the people that are out on the street right now, that are risking their livelihoods, that are risking their physical health, and go support them. You know, whatever they need. If the police is going to storm them, try to stand between them. Try to show that these people are not alone. Try to support the people that are out there and show them that you're not alone. You know, there's people out there on the streets risking themselves. Support them. Support the students.
Great. I see Edwin standing, but can I just? I'll just walk to you because Edwin is in the back. And then afterwards, the lady in the back, and then it's. I fear it's done. Oh my God, there's one more. I'm holding the microphone.
Nee, ik wil alleen zeggen boycott, boycott, boycott.
That's a good idea as well. There are very good apps for that, and also the BDS website gives a lot of information on how not to buy into occupation. Thank you for the addition, Edwin.
Yeah, my question was regarding social media and advocating, echoing. What we see is there's a lot of censorship by Meta. And my question is for Marloes, it seems like they get away with it. I am very ignificant in terms of followers. I have a small account, but even I am restricted all the times. When I try to share, I try to follow, I try to like. I always have problems. What are the steps you as
the legal steps,
way.
Yeah. It's a very good question because indeed the social media platforms often tend to follow those very broad definitions of anti-Semitism, of terrorism, and then ban a lot, and then shadow banning is a big problem as well. Well, one very concrete action that might be interesting now, so Meta has an oversight board. So it's an independent board that has to rule on whether Facebook, for instance, can ban a certain expression. And they have now a call for, open input for a few cases that are about speeches such as "from the river." And they haven't banned these particular speeches, and now they're asking, and they have to rule about, they're sort of the constitutional court of Meta, so to say. They have to rule about, what about these cases? And people can provide information as well, so that's one thing that I am at least going to do from my perspective. So there are also ways to put pressure there and to complain, of course, but I'm not sure if people really get a reaction to that when they do so. But you can at least complain in these cases on their website.
Can we find these ways as well? If we look up the ELSC, for example, Tobias, are you linking to this sort of like complaint or report mechanisms?
Yeah, we do. We obviously take all kinds of repressions, also in online environments. So please do report that to us. That the link for that website is elsc.support/intake. But also we cooperate with an organization called Hamle, and they are all about, it's a Palestinian organization, all about online advocacy and how it's being, repressed in certain contexts. So please also check them out. It's written 7 AMLEH on the web.
Great. Thank you so much. I see a hand. Is it a very short intervention? Okay. I'll come to you and I'll hold the mic.
Okay. As you said, you were planning on buying a space. But as we can see from what happened with the Congress, or groups like Die Linke Berlin, or like Die Linke and German groups that we, or before this, have seen as left, supported the banning of the Congress. And we can see that we cannot get our rights through reform. What do you say we do then?
If not reform, what then?
Revolution!
Intifada! Before someone starts complaining about the word intifada, it's only Arabic for uprising. So just to clear that out. Any last words on what to do if not with reform? Briefly.
I think, like the last 6-7 months have also shown that the governments don't respond to much except if we force them to. That across the board, polls have shown that the majority of people are against the genocide. The majority of people are against the government's complicity. But like you said, like the new contract came out, but it's completely the opposite of what the people want. Same in Germany, we have 60% of people against the genocide. Doesn't matter. The state has shown again and again they will only change something if they're forced to. In the past, we were able to stop apartheid in South Africa because of civil disobedience, because people stopped supporting the apartheid state, stopped shipping things there, did sit-ins, just like that's happening now. That's why I say support the students, because they are fed up and they're saying, we've tried everything we can, they're not going to help. We're going to take what we can get from the state. We're going to force them to act if they won't act through our voting. These types of initiatives, students, protests.
Thank you, Nabil. Absolutely. This has brought us to the end of this afternoon. I would like to thank all the speakers that were here, Wieland, Nabil, Marloes, Tobias, and of course, Dr. Abu-Sitta. I don't think he's still watching us. And of course, Sophie, how could I forget you? And Sarah, you were in my blind spot and you were right in front of me. Incredible. It was, well, I found it an enriching afternoon. I found myself also surrounded by people who are, wrestling and fighting for a struggle that is not ending yet, but we are making steps forward, I think. So there's also, I'm leaving this room also with hope. Let's stay awake, let's stay loud. Support human rights organizations, support advocacy groups such as the Rights Forum. There is a QR code there. If you scan it, you go right to our website. You can make a donation. Donate to the other initiatives. I think we can put up links on our website in our report of this session. And I would like to end with a quote by one of my favorite philosophers, Hannah Arendt, a Jewish German philosopher, on the need to stay together. Action is never possible in isolation. To be isolated is to be deprived of the capacity to act. So let's stick together, let's stay loud, and let's stay awake. Thank you so much.